As a result, in this condition, Angira Muni arrives, inquires about why he's so despondent despite being so opulent. Shritaketu reveals his heart to Angira Rishi and seeks a solution from him, to which Angira Rishi performs a yagya by which the king can produce a child, but then he says his child will be Harsha Shoka. He'll be the cause of happiness and lamentation. And then he left without giving the import of his statement. So Shritaketu interpreted in one particular way, which disallowed him from appreciating the true meaning of Ankita Rishi's words. As a result of that, the child was born. The king became overjoyed. The child was born of the first wife. The king became overjoyed by that. He became preoccupied with the care and love of the first wife to the negligence of the other wives. The other wives becomes, smitten by profound envy. And as a result of their envy, they administered poison to the child and killed him. And that's where we left off. So the story continues. We'll pick it up from verse number 44. So unaware of the poison administered by her co-wives, Queen Kritaduti walked within the house, thinking that her son was sleeping deeply. She did not understand that he was dead. Thinking that her child had been sleeping for a long time, Queen Kritaduti, who was certainly very intelligent, ordered the nurse, "My dear friend, please bring my son here." When the maidservant approached the child who was lying down, she saw that his eyes were turned upward. There were no signs of life, all his senses having stopped, and she could understand that the child was dead. Seeing this, she immediately cried, "Now I am doomed," and fell to the ground. In great agitation, the maidservant struck her breast with both hands and cried loudly in regretful words. Hearing her loud voice, the queen immediately came, and when she approached her son, she saw that he was suddenly dead. In great lamentation, her hair and dress in disarray, the queen fell to the ground unconscious. O King Parikshit, hearing the loud crying, all the inhabitants of the palace came, both men and women. Being equally aggrieved, they also began to cry. The queens who had administered the poison also cried pretentiously, knowing full well their offense. When King Shritaketu heard of his son's death from unknown causes, he became almost blind. Because of his great affection for his son, his lamentation grew like a blazing fire, and as he went to see the dead child, he kept slipping and falling on the ground. Surrounded by his ministers and other officers, and the learned Brahmanas present, the king approached and fell unconscious at the child's feet, his hair and dress scattered. When the king, breathing heavily, regained consciousness, his eyes were tearful and he could not speak. When the queen saw her husband, King Shritaketu, emerge in great lamentation and saw the dead child, who was the only son in the family, she lamented in various ways. This increased the pain in the cores of the hearts of all the inhabitants of the palace, the ministers, and all the Brahmanas. The garland of flowers decorating the queen's head fell, and her hair scattered. Falling tears melted the collyrium, I don't know if I said that right, on her eyes and moistened her breasts, which were covered with kumkuma powder. As she lamented the loss of her son, her loud crying resembled the sweet sound of a kurari bird. And now, the next few verses is the statements of lamentation from Queen Kritaduti. They're very interesting, so we're going to look at them a little bit. Alas, O Providence, O Creator, you are certainly inexperienced in creation. For during the lifetime of a father, you have caused the death of his son, thus acting in opposition to your creative laws. If you are determined to contradict these laws, you are certainly the enemy of living entities and are never merciful. Aho vidatas twamativa balisho. So aho is an expression of lamentation. And who is she blaming? Vidhata. She's blaming providence. Twamativa balisho. What is she blaming for? That you are certainly very childish. What is the childishness of providence? Yastvatma shristya pratirupam ihase. You are acting pratirupam. you're acting opposite according to your own laws of creation. So the logic here is that the father was born first, so he should die first. The son who was born second should not die before the father. That would be a reversal of the natural course of the creative laws. That is her logic here. It is the logic of lamentation also, obviously, where there is no law that says that a father must die before the son. But the logic of lamentation, the mind in a state of lamentation thinks apratirupam in an opposite way. It is a projection of our own mental state onto providence. In any case, so she says, Pare nujivat parasya yamrite viparya yaschetvam asid para. So if you are going to act opposite to the own laws that you have established, viparya yaschetvam asid para, then you are indeed an enemy of the souls in this world. You are indeed an enemy. Okay, next verse. So the rebuttal to this is, where is there such a law that the father must die before the son? There is no such law like this. Rather, birth and death depends on the karma of the living entity. As at least according to, Sankhya Yoga Vedanta, birth is simply the soul coming in contact with a particular body because of karma. And death is also the soul being separated from that body because of the fructification of karma. So birth and death is dependent on karmic inheritance. It is not actually dependent on the things that we see happening around us, but rather it's depending on karma. That is the truth according to Yoga Sankhya, karma. So the birth and death is the birth of the child, and his death is also due to his karma, which is different from his father. Not that there is some law that the father should die first. So nahi kramaschat ihar mittu jamano shariri nam astuta atma karma bhi. So if it be argued, my lord, you may say there is no law that a father must die in the lifetime of his son. Nahi kramas chat iha mritu jamano. So nahi kramas means there is no law that there is a sequential order, as you've argued, that the father must die before the son in this world. Mritu janmano shariri nam asuta atma karma bhi. According to the atma karma bhi, the results of one's own karmic reactions, then there is the existence of a body at the time of birth and its non-existence at the time of death. So that is due to karma. So while you're blaming providence, blame karma. But karma, of course, is inanimate. So being inanimate, it cannot actually do anything by itself. So there must be a conscious entity who's dispensing the fruits of one's karmic activity. And that entity is ultimately the Supreme Lord. So in that way, it may be counter-argued that God is ultimately still the cause and therefore the one to be blamed. And she brings up another argument in the second line, which is kind of interesting. That, okay, so you're saying that this is simply the law of karma. Birth and death is due to the law of karma, and this is the way of nature. But yasneha pasho nijasarga vridhaya, for the purpose of expanding the creation, nijasarga vridhaya, expanding this statement, nijasarga vridhaya, means having children. Expanding the creation means having the children. So for the purpose of expanding the creation, yasneha pasha, you create the ropes of affection. Sneha pasha means the rope of affection. This is a common term that you hear in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is not usually used as a positive statement. The sneha pasha is basically synonymous with the hridaya granthi, the knots in the heart, the rope of affection. Is basically alluding to the nature of false ego and how it binds the consciousness of jivas to material bodies, which is the concept of I and mine. We have that famous prayer, which I'm often fond of quoting from Queen Kunti, Sneha Pashme Manchandi, Dridam Pandushu Vishnushu. Where Queen Kunti is asking Krishna to cut the Sneha Pasha for the Vishnus and the Pandavas so that her love is able to flow towards Krishna without being impeded by the attachment to material bodies. Otherwise, the attachment to material bodies is like a dam, which causes the flow of consciousness towards God to be blocked. And therefore, the Sneha Passion is often in the Bhagavatam presented negatively as a pejorative, that which is impeding the flow of consciousness toward its source, towards Krishna, towards reality. So you've given this Sneha Pasha only for expanding the creation. Swayam Krita Ste Tamimam Vivrichasi. So if you, by this action of yours, of in this particular case, killing the son before the father, you yourself are cutting that affection. Imam Vivrichasi. You are cutting this here refers to the Sneha Pasha. In other words, you've created this rope of affection so that living entities, means specifically man and woman, will become attached to each other to have children. But then if you cut this rope of affection before, then no one would ever have affection. If you cut the rope of affection, so that cutting the rope of affection means understanding that the laws of karma is the cause of birth and death. Therefore, okay, why should I have affection for children? Why should I care about their birth? Why should I care about their death? This is all just due to karma only. And then in this way, if one goes on thinking, then the rope of affection is cut. That is like the Gyanis. They basically become heartless. As Rupa Goswami says, Gyan and Vairagya is generally maybe okay in the beginning of bhakti, but it's generally not the method because it causes the heart to become hard. So the Gyanis may think like this. This is all simply the loss of karma. Birth of a child, that is karma. Its death is also karma. So why should I care? So if all living entities thought like this, then they would not have any affection for anyone and for their children. Then how will your creation expand? So in this way, she's making an argument that you've created things. Your creation is very, very childish. Okay, I'm going to read the translation. And I want to share one other thing. My Lord, you may say that there is no law that a father must die in the lifetime of his son, and that a son must be born in the lifetime of his father, since everyone lives and dies according to his own fruit of activity. However, fruit of activity is so strong that birth and death depend upon it. There is no need of a God, need of a controller or God. Again, if you say that a controller is needed because material energy does not have the power to act, it's insentient. So someone has to give the fruit of karma, that is Paramatma. One may answer that if the bonds of affection you have created are disturbed by fruit of action, right? And no one will raise children with affection. Instead, everyone will cruelly neglect his children. Since you have cut the bonds of affection that compel the parent to raise his child, you appear inexperienced and unintelligent. So that is her particular argument. And Prabhupada writes, not in this particular purport, in the previous purport, he says that this is how the conditioned souls, what is the sentence? He says, this is the way a conditioned soul condemns the Supreme Creator when he meets with reverses. So that's the interesting point. When the living entities meet with reverses in life, they blame God. They don't appreciate the forces behind the eventualities of their life and the forces such as daiva or karmic inheritance. So they blame God. They don't blame themselves. So as a training of consciousness in the Bhagavatam, you'll hear all the devotees, every single one of them, saying that whenever they meet with reverses, they say that it is due to their own karma that they're suffering. And this is the training of consciousness, because there's basically two ways of, well, three. You can say like this, though. There are two ways of engaging with suffering in this world. The one way is to see yourself as a victim of eventualities. And the other is to see yourself as the cause of the circumstances in some subtle form. You may not always be able to determine what are those causes that led to the effects that you're experiencing now. But because you can understand that we live in a cause and effect world, there must have been something that I have done that has given this particular effect. So in the one consciousness of being a victim, you're completely disempowered, because everything all eventualities are happening to you by forces that are completely outside of your control. Whereas in the second sort of approach to suffering, you're responsible for it. And therefore, there's something within your power. There's something that you can change in order to bring about a better result. There's a third way of looking at things, which is more the devotional way. Although most devotees in their prayers, you'll see that they blame their karmic inheritance whenever there's reverses in life. For example, Tatenu Kampam Sukshamik Shamana, Unjana Ebatma Kritami Paka. While eagerly awaiting the mercy of God, the devotee thinks that he's enjoying the fruits of his own misdeeds. This is a general statement you'll hear from all the devotees. But then the question comes, well, if they're bhaktas, especially if they're exalted bhaktas, certainly there is no karma. So if there is no karma, how can they be suffering the results of their own misdeeds? Therefore, we understand the statements of the bhaktas to be a type of sanchari bhav. It means that, their hearts are steeped in bhav, which is like a great ocean. And one of the waves of devotion that comes out of that ocean of love is humility. And so that emotional vyabhichari bhav causes them to utter such statements of humility like, this is my karma. But for the theologians, that is not acceptable because of the nature of bhakti to destroy the kleshas, right? One of the characteristics of bhakti is kleshakni. So they don't accept that as the conclusion, the siddhanta, that is the karma of the devotee. But rather, there's can be two reasons why it happens to a devotee. The happiness of the devotee is due to the gifts of bhakti, and the distress of a devotee is due to either aparad and getting the reactions of offenses committed, or else it is the Supreme Lord who is taking charge of the life of the devotee in order to augment his devotion, usually. For example, when Parikshit Maharaj is cursed to die in 7 days, then he reports to the sages that it is God himself who has come to me in the form of a curse of a Brahmin boy in order to break my attachment to the material household life and to be the cause of my, as I've been saying recently, midwife in the Bhagavatam. In fact, when he was cursed to die in 7 days, he didn't actually know. Shamika Rishi, the father of the boy who cursed Parikshit Maharaj, sent one servant to Parikshit Maharaj to inform him. Otherwise, he would have just lived his life like normal. And then suddenly on the 7th day, a bird would have come and killed him. So, and Birha Bhagavatamrita is so nicely written. Not only did he think the curse one of the forms of God, but then he said, God then came to me in the form of the messenger of Shamika Rishi. I think his name was Gormukha. I don't precisely remember. I think his name was Gormukha, the messenger. Because if the messenger had not come, he would not have known. Then he would have just kept on ruling kingdom. 7 days, snake bird would have come and killed him. And then there'd be no Srimad Bhagavatam. So now God came to me in the form of this curse. And then God came in another form as Gormukha, the messenger, in order to take me by the hand and bring me to the bank of the Jamuna. And on that bank, God will come in another form also as Shukadeva Goswami in order to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. So in this way, God came in all these forms, as the curse, as the messenger, as the speaker of the Bhagavatam, and as the Bhagavatam itself, which is not different from Krishna. So in all these forms, Krishna has come to Parikshit Maharaj to show mercy. So for a devotee, he meets with reverses in life or all eventualities in life as grace. So you can imagine the different types of experiences each type of consciousness affords the soul. One type of conscious victim, nothing's my fault, I'm completely powerless. Another is I'm responsible for whatever this effect is, and so I have to adjust my own activity in order to bring about better results in the future. At least there's some sense of power there that you can change your course. And then, excuse me, I'm a little distracted here. And then it's the devotee whose senses are, you can say, eating. As such, the senses eat their objects. The senses are eating grace. Everything is grace for the bhakta. His eyes eats grace in the forms of everything around him. His ears hears grace. His nose smells grace. His tongue tastes grace. His tactile sense, touches grace. Everything in life is just a manifestation of God and God's grace upon the soul. And that leads to another sort of experience. You can say an ecstatic or joyful experience. In any case, the conditioned souls were often like Queen Kritaduti, so we blame. We are always the victim of our circumstances, and therefore we tend to blame the external situations, and ultimately we tend to blame God. There's a nice statement in this regard. I forget how the statement goes, honestly, but something to the effect that circumstances are not the cause of our suffering. Circumstances simply reveals the self to the self. It reveals the self to the self. And we think we are whatever we think we are, but our circumstances of life, they actually bring out what we truly are on like a deeper core level. I need to find the statement. It's a very good statement. I know where to find it. Circumstances reveal ourselves. Maybe I'll post it in the chat box afterwards. So these are different approaches. This is Queen Kritaduti's approach, but I did want to share something that's interesting. So when Krishna comes, when Apura comes to Vrindavan, sent by Kamsa to deliver Krishna to Mathura. Okay, give me a second here. So when it is realized by the gopis that Apura is going to take Krishna out of Braj, then they begin to openly protest. So this is the first time, and the bare open, they're showing their devotion to Krishna. Usually they're hiding it. They're only able to indicate with sidelong glances and so on from the distance in front of the other people of Braj because they're unmarried. But here they were forcibly trying to stop Krishna by jumping in front of the cart, let the cart roll over me also, but he'll not be able to leave Vrindavan. So in that plight of imminent separation from Krishna, the gopis began uttering many beautiful statements, which later on became known as the Viraha Gita. You know how there are about 6 Gitas in the 10th canto. The first one is called as Venu Gita. Second one is Venu Gita is Purvaraga. Before they're actually meeting Krishna, their love for him is coming. Then Pranaya Gita, that is during Rasa dance when they meet Krishna. Then Gopi Gita, when they meet with separation from Krishna during the Rasa dance. Then there's Yugo Gita. So Yugo Gita means when Krishna goes off. The Yugo Gita happens after meeting Krishna, in Rasa dance. But then Krishna goes off to the forest for the day, and so they're feeling separation from Krishna. This is called Pravas, when Krishna goes elsewhere, and they're feeling separation from him. So then there's Yugo Gita. And then there's this Viraha Gita. So the Viraha Gita happens in the 39th chapter. And Viraha Gita is Prema Vaichitya. Prema Vaichitya means that Krishna is just their imminent separation is just about to come. And so in anticipation of the separation, the gopis, or those who experience Prema Vaichitya, they go into a plight of separation, and then song comes out, obviously matching the heart. So this is called Viraha Gita. The last Gita that you see in 10th canto is Brahmara Gita. That is, Brahmara Gita is when Krishna is in Mathura. So this is called Surdura Prabhas. It's a very intense separation. Krishna is not just gone for the day, but he's gone for who knows how long. And the gopis, particularly Radharani and Brahmara Gita, the Gita of the bumblebee, where Radharani is speaking like a mad woman to Krishna in the form of a bumblebee. So this is in the spirit of Surdura Prabhas, very intense separation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Gambhira, he is in this spirit of Radha singing the Brahmara Gita. That is his Gambhira Leela. And it is through that Leela he's able to fully accomplish his internal purposes, 3 in number. So anyway, zooming back to the Viraha Gita, Prabhupada said that this is how a conditioned soul blames God when he meets with reverses. They blame providence. But there are some nice verses here, gopis. I'm going to read the first 3 verses. Say their song. So the gopis said, this is starting with verse 19, 10th canto, chapter 39, verse 19. I'm just reading the translations because of time, but their statements are so beautiful. O providence, you have no mercy. It sounds like Queen Kritaduti. You bring embodied creatures together in friendship and love. That's her point. You cause the rope of affection. That is Queen Kritaduti's point, in other words. You cause the rope of affection to bring them together in friendship and love, and then senselessly separate them before they fulfill their desires. This is exactly Queen Kritaduti's statement. This whimsical play of yours is like a child's game. See, same accusation they're giving to Krishna or giving to Providence. Having shown us Mukunda's face, framed by dark locks and beautified by his fine cheeks, raised nose, and gentle smiles, which eradicate all misery. You are now making that face invisible. This behavior of yours is not at all good. This last verse I'll read for now. This last statement is just like, wow. O Providence, though you came here with the name Akrura, you are indeed cruel. For like a fool, you are taking away what you once gave us. Well, what did Providence give them? Those eyes with which we have seen, even in one feature of Lord Manudwisha's form, the perfection of your entire creation. So they're saying you've given the eyes by which we were able to see Krishna. So he said, I'm not taking away your eyes, I'm just taking away Krishna. So the gopis, their point here is to say that without seeing Krishna, then the eyes might as well be blind. And you've given the eyes by which we can see that which is worthy of seeing, that is Krishna. And now you're taking away Krishna. So that is like you taking back those eyes which you have given by which we could see Krishna. So better I go blind and not to see my beloved in separation. It is better that I go blind. It's such a statement of devotion. It could be elaborated on. When bhakti becomes very intense, as we discussed in the other class, just like the fire of hunger does not allow the person who's burning with that fire of desire to relish material objects. Those who are burning with the fire of praying, they also become blind to the external world. Yugaitam nemeshena, chakshusha prabhishayitam, shunyayitam jagasarvam govinda virahenam. The Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's own prayer in the spirit of separation. How do I mute? I need more power on this thing. If someone mute Gal or making noise.
Sorry.
Yugai Tandameshenam. In separation from Govinda, I'm feeling, a moment to be like a yuga. I'm feeling a moment to be like a yuga. Everything is shunyayitam, jagasar. The whole universe has become utterly void. So without seeing that Krishna, what is the use of my eyes? Better I become blind. My senses, what are the use of my senses? Better I become blind. Such are the statements of separation from Krishna. So their prayers, like Queen Kritaduti's prayers, are very similar. Same accusations being given. They're also blaming Providence. So what is the difference? The difference is the object of the affection. The object of affection for the gopis, of course, is Krishna. And the object of affection, Sneha Pasha, is for the material body, which is not worthy of that level of devotion. The body is not worthy of that level of devotion. Devotion is meant for Krishna only. That is the difference. So I like to say here now, and with this as an interesting thought of reflection, naturally we have affection for the material world that is ineluctable on account of being conditioned from beginningless time. We have devotion to this material world. And as a result of that devotion, we'll meet with sorrow. That is inevitable. But because we are also devotees and we know to whom our devotion should be directed, we should not allow our sorrow to go to waste. Damodar Maharaj, he said this once many years ago, and it always stuck with me. He said, one should not let good suffering go to waste. And so kind of in that spirit, we see that the prayer of the statement of Queen Kritaduti is like the statement of the gopis. And in some ways, it comes from a similar space. It comes from the sorrow of being separated from an object of love and affection. And so, but anyway, so as we have our affections for things in this world, and when that affection leads to its inevitable result, which is sorrow, we might have an opportunity to leverage that sorrow and commune with God. For example, just to give an example, you have affection for some loved one and you get separated from them for whatever reasons and you feel sorrow because of that. So you're in that space, and that sorrow is certainly based on material, they're based on material attachments and ignorance, avidya. But taking that sorrow, you can offer that to Krishna. How might you offer that sorrow to Krishna? Well, you might offer that sorrow to Krishna in the same way that the gopis are praying to Krishna. Your sorrow is certainly based on material circumstances, but why shouldn't that be offered to Krishna? If you can offer apples and oranges and pears to Krishna, you can also offer your emotions to Krishna. So how might I make an offering of this sorrow that comes from my attachment to material things? You may sing these prayers of the gopis, Viraha Gita, on leveraging your sorrow that comes from attachment to material things and offering that to Krishna and singing Viraha Gita. And Krishna can hear that prayer in that spirit in the same way that when Ajibala, he was chanting the holy name of Krishna with affection for his son, not affection for Narayana, affection for his son. But Narayana took that affection as coming to him. Because it was Namabas, so Narayana took the affection for himself. So in the same way, you are feeling some sorrow, some strong emotion. You may offer that to God through a particular type of vocal prayer. And even though it isn't a bas, for example, the sorrow that comes from losing a son will not be the sorrow of the gopis, but both are sorrowful songs coming out, and you're singing the gopi song with that emotion, and it becomes kind of like an abhas. And that abhas bhakti has extraordinary power also. You can find God in that grief, God in that sorrow. So I end with this last statement I saw the other day, and I was talking about it with my devotee. This is a statement of a famous author named, I can't pronounce it, Dostoevsky, something like that. In any case, he writes that we are closest to God, something to the effect that we're closest to God in grief, something to that effect. If we learn how to commune with God at the rendezvous point of grief, or at Grief Street, we may be able to rendezvous with God if we learn how to offer those emotional states to Bhagavan also. So yeah, I wanted to share this as an interesting sort of meditation. Prabhupada is writing that this is how a conditioned soul criticizes God, but that is also how the gopis criticize God. So it may be possible to leverage these emotional states and offer them to Bhagavan. And that way commune with God, even in our sorrow, and that way become purified and become elevated. There may be such opportunity to do so. I'm going to stop there. There are a few more statements here in the chapter, and I had hoped to read the rest of it, but I wanted to share this particular idea that I think is quite interesting. We'll pause there and see. I saw that Athena may have some questions. You want to ask something?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat. So this goes back earlier, when we were talking about karma, providence. And so I'm going to, I guess, give an example. Ultimately, when you had brought up that the queen was really blaming providence, even though with karma, it ultimately goes back to providence, I guess, choosing the karma. But that's what I really want to clarify. So as an example, we say the body that you're given in the next life is based on, say, your last thoughts. Like at the time of death, whatever you think of, that's the body that you get. So in one sense, yes, it is our own choosing and our own thoughts and that sanchita karma is based off of our own actions and choices. However, say the body that you get, is it like, and when we say it's ultimately providence, is it that it's actually an active hand, like God is literally almost like sitting there and then choosing what within the sanchita karma that gets actually manifest? Or do we just loosely, when we say it's providence, it's because it's this universal law that God created, and then it's just working and there's a mechanism. And while we don't want to say it's random, ultimately whatever is chosen is kind of like, it's like, programmed in one sense, but the programmer is God. So we say God chose the body that you're given. And so long-winded way of saying is that, is it like God actually has an active hand in choosing what gets manifest, or is it just because he's the programmer and created this program that just, I don't say randomly chooses, but
we may have to say that it is both, because the idea here is that the mechanism is inert matter, so it can't do anything by itself. It has to be infused by a conscious force. So Paramatma is the conscious force behind the mechanism, and therefore it's both in that sense. It's a mechanism, by God's Shaktis, it's all working out automatically, but he's a conscious force by which it could do something, it can do anything whatsoever. And so in that sense, it's like him selecting. But the reason we don't like to use that language, because it creates a wrong sort of image of like God's like preoccupied with like, okay, now you get this body, okay, then you get that body in. It's it's not like that. But it is like that insofar as the matter being inert cannot do anything by itself. And therefore it has to be infused by the conscious force, that conscious force being Paramatma's consciousness or Shakti. And in that sense, he is giving directly to all living entities according to according to what they deserve.
But the way, well, I guess the way then I interpret that is it's not active, it's just the mere presence. So just like, say, all the three different manifestations of Vishnu, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakasha Vishnu, Kshirodakasha Vishnu, just their mere presence, right? Then there's growth, there is activity, as because matter is inert. But to your point, God is not actively choosing. You're just then saying the mere presence of Paramatma, that conscious force, therefore this matter, this inert matter is somehow moving, but Paramatma is neutral and he's not actually choosing consciously choosing which karma is being manifest. Are you saying just mere presence?
Yeah, you can describe like that, mere presence. The point is that matter can't move without God. That's the point. And so sometimes you can describe it as the mechanism. You can describe things in terms of the mechanisms of matter. Karma works like this, but matter can't move without God. And so you can also describe it as God doing, because without God, it couldn't do anything whatsoever. And so sometimes you get an explanation in terms of the mechanisms, and sometimes you may hear explanation in terms of God's hand or God's giving, etc. And both explanations are okay. There's no problem.
But you're ultimately saying it's not God actively sitting there going like B5, blonde hair,
No. He's situated in his own sort of Shakti, the bliss of self.
Okay. But then this goes to, I forget in which canto, one of the earlier cantos, where it's the demigods. Well, this might be slightly different. It's like the demigods actually administering the karma, but by the direction of Paramatma. So ultimately it is God administering it, like choosing the karma, but the demigods are like executing it.
Yeah, you can have all sorts of explanation in terms of the mechanics of how nature works, which includes its managers such as the devatas. That explanation is also acceptable from one angle. And then another explanation, that without God, it can happen whatsoever. So ultimately it's God. He's the cause of all causes, etc. That also is acceptable.
Okay. But so that's just an extension, but still it's Paramatma at the presence. But
yeah,
sorry.
Everything is ultimately rooted in God. It cannot be but otherwise, because reality is non-dual consciousness. That is our fundamental talking point.
Right. And sorry, this is getting a little nitpicky, but it's interesting because, as you say, the presence of Paramatma. But when the soul, I guess this goes with the transmigration, when the soul is transplanted, it moves in the subtle body, but Paramatma also moves with the soul. And therefore, at, say, conception, when the soul, it's like the super soul is already there with the soul, even like at conception, and therefore the karma manifests.
Yes, I think. I mean, Paramatma is always going to be there. The jiva cannot. Nothing can happen without God as the very ground of it. Springing out of Paramatma, resting on Paramatma, returning to Paramatma. Right.
But I guess that's my question, where I had, without thinking about it, so when the soul is transmigrating from one body to another, it's the subtle body. But does Paramatma move with the jiva during?
Yes, why not?
Okay, because then that, I guess, makes sense how it is there for before the soul is even given a body, right? It's like the mechanism, the conscious mechanism of Paramatma is already there, choosing which body the soul is getting, because it's not like the soul is planted and then that when the soul is already planted, then that body's already chosen, and then Paramatma comes in. Paramatma is already with the jiva.
Paramatma is the first cause. So as a first cause, he's going to be involved in all eventualities that manifest. Before there's anything, there's Paramatma, right? That's what the Upanishad says. Before there was creation, maintenance, and destruction, there's the Paramatma. So everything afterwards is rooted in the Paramatma, including the subtle body and all the laws of nature that the conditioned souls are conditioned by. Paramatma must be there, absolutely.
Okay.
Otherwise, it is thing. People do the same activity, but they get different results. They may do the same activity with the same, intensity and hard work, but they're getting vastly different results. So in this way, the Bhagavatam tries to offer a logic that there must be a conscious person behind giving the results. It's not just mechanism. Otherwise, if it was just mechanism, then two entities doing the same thing in the exact same way with the exact same intensity should get the same result. But it is not seen like that. So in this way, they try to help us understand that there's, I'm using this language, a conscious force, or ultimately Paramatma, who is dispensing the results to different living entities.
Okay. And when you are saying the Paramatma is the first cause, you are talking about Shirodakshai Vishnu, right? Not like Mahavishnu, even though, because they're all Paramatmas of like the whole material universe, and then the universe, and then the individual living being. You were referring to Paramatma in the heart, Shirodakshai Vishnu.
No, Mahavishnu is first, then Garbhodakshai Vishnu expands, and then Shirodakshai Vishnu expands from him. That's how we normally hear it. Anyway, okay. However you think about it, God first, that's the point. Then everything else is coming thereafter.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much. Right.
Okay, anything else anyone wants to ask?
Yeah, just to follow up on Athena's thing, as you said, is a conscious force behind this mechanism of our karma. So my question is, where does Durga Devi, who is also a conscious entity, where does she fit in there?
Somewhere, but after God.
Okay.
God first.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then shall we pause here? What about snake bite question above, ultimately? Yeah, could we also see providence as a snake bird that ultimately kills Parikshit Maharaj? Yeah, you can see it in so many different ways. I gave 3 general visions that the souls have. 1, that they're the victim. 2, that they're it is their karmic inheritance. And 3, it is the grace of God. These are the 3 basic visions that a soul may evince when dealing with the reversals in life. So seeing the snake bird as, providence, daiva or vidhata. For the non-devotees, means karmic inheritance. So that will be their vision, and that will cause them to respond and response. They'll try to intuit what they need to learn from that experience in order to do better in the right now. Whereas the devotees, they take vidhata or providence as God himself doing something in their life. And so this is just grace. So these are the three general visions that a soul may evince in this world in relationship, especially in relationship to suffering. I'm a victim. That's the most common one. It's my karmic inheritance, for those who are maybe Gani type or they've got some knowledge. And then the bhaktas, everything is grace. So we like that. Okay. So we'll pause here for now, and I'll see you guys on Monday. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari